Okay, attitude shift. Remember last time I spoke, I mentioned that shift happens. I think that was just last week. Yes, and as I've mentioned many times before, I have to be careful what I say from up here because then I get to live it the coming week. And I've been living that. Shift has been happening. So I want to invite you to participate today, if you're willing. Now's your opportunity. I grew up here in Birmingham, so I'm just going to say it the way Mama would say it. Now's y'all's opportunity. You know, here, and as I grew up, y'all could be either singular or plural. And if we wanted to be real clear about the plural, we'd say all y'all. So all y'all have an opportunity to participate today if you'd like, if y'all would like to. So whenever you hear me say something about temptation or the devil and you feel like participating, you can just let me know by giving me a little hiss. Here's your opportunity. Now, there have been times, face it, there have been times in church where we wanted to hiss, right? Yeah, and it's mostly acceptable just to applaud, not to hiss. But today, you get to hiss. So let's practice. Give me the devil. All right, good. That's wonderful. Oh, y'all are good at this. Y'all are good at this. So we're entering into the season that's moving up to Easter. And there are four parts of this Easter story. It begins with the wilderness. Then we move to the garden. And then we move to the cross. And then the resurrection. Today, I'm going to talk about the wilderness. What happened in the wilderness? Temptation. Yes, I'm going to talk about that, and then the next two times I speak, I'm going to talk about the garden and the cross. So this is part one, and then Reverend Charles will be here on Easter Sunday, and he'll talk with you about the resurrection. So where was I? Oh, yes. I was in the wilderness. All right, imagine if you were in a human body. Oh, yes, y'all are in bodies, right? Yes. So you don't have to imagine so carefully. So you're in a human body, and you realize you really have come here with a divine imperative. I'm here for a divine purpose. Can anyone here relate? Yeah, I thought maybe you might. And you're here, and then the first thing that you're guided to do is to go be baptized. Anyone relate to that? Yes, a couple of times. Yes. Go be baptized by your cousin. That didn't happen for me. Your cousin who happens to be a prophet. So imagine, if you will, that Jesus had just been baptized by his cousin John, the prophet. As he came up from the water, a dove descended, and there was a mighty, powerful, loving, embracing voice that said, "This is my beloved, in whom I am well pleased." Imagine if that happened with you. What would you do then? What would you do? Depends on where we are. What would I do? Depends on where I am and my level of consciousness. Sometimes there are days when I would just really like to just run screaming. I think some of you can relate to that as well. But what Jesus did was he went apart. He went into deep meditation apart in the wilderness. Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, returned from the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, where for 40 days, and we know that in Middle Eastern literature, 40 days just means as long as it takes. He was tempted, really, he was tempted by the devil. He ate nothing at all during those days. I think God had been tempted. And when they were over, yes, and when they were over, he was famished. The devil said to him, "If you are the son of," yes, all right, you guys are good. Okay, I'm going back to my other roots. Yes, y'all are good. If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become a loaf of bread. And Jesus answered him, it is written, one does not live by bread alone. Then the devil led him up and showed him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And the devil, yes, said to him, to you I will give their glory and all this authority, for it has been given over to me, and I give it to anyone I please. If you then will worship me, it will all be yours. And Jesus answered, worship the Lord your God and serve only him. That's what is written. Then the devil took him to Jerusalem and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, if you're the Son of God, throw yourself down from here, because it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to protect you, and on their hands they will bear you up so that you will not dash your foot against a stone. And Jesus answered him, do not put the Lord your God to the test. So it is written. And then the devil departed from him. So what was Jesus doing in the wilderness? He was going apart to see and contemplate, what is it that is my divine imperative? Why am I here? What is the reason I'm here? And he got 3 ideas of why he was not here. Very often during the time of Lent, we Unity students are encouraged to give up something, and sometimes that thing is called complaining. Yes, to give up complaining. Because we know, we agree, that whatever we put our energy into increases, right? So I want to invite you to look at it a little bit differently. Complain once, we get information. This is something I don't want in my life. So complain, yes, complain one time. But when we keep on and on and on about the same thing, then that's a prayer. All right, we've moved out of grace and we're into affirmation. This is what I'm putting my attention on, and this is what I want. So Jesus was finding out what he didn't want. So imagine if you were just coming up out of the water and a dove descended and you heard the heavenly host saying, it wasn't the heavenly host, those are angels, it was the voice of God, saying, you are my beloved, in whom I'm well pleased. Just take a moment. Close your eyes with me. Hear that voice. Take a breath and open your eyes. How does that feel? To know that you are the beloved in whom all that is well pleased. So what would we do then? It would depend on where we are in consciousness, in our spiritual development. I think we can all agree that we're each on a journey. We're on a path. And for each of us, it looks different, doesn't it? It has been said that there are 4 phases of this thing we call spiritual development. First, there's the mortal. That's we're unconscious. We're victims. And then we begin to wake up as metaphysicians. And we are victors, and we are conscious. And then we become even more awake, and we are mystics, vehicles, intuitive. And then we become masters, living verity or truth. Victim, victor, vehicle, verity. Mortal, metaphysician, mystic, master. And the interesting thing is that there are areas in each of our lives where we're operating at the mortal level. Can any of you relate? Yeah, well, I know I can. I'm operating at the mortal level, and the bake sale was part of that for me. And there are other areas in my life where I'm working at the metaphysician level, where it's important for me to use affirmations, to choose what I want in my life. And there are other levels in my life where I'm operating at the mystic level, and where I know that there's nothing to want, that it's already here. There are very few, if any, areas where I am operating at the master level. And I am willing to believe that there are some of you in this room. If you are here, please be patient with me. So as mortals, we experience God as creator. As metaphysicians, we experience God not just as creator, but as co-creator with me. As mystics, we experience God within. And as masters, as Jesus was master, we experience God as me. So what was Jesus doing in the wilderness? He just had a profound spiritual experience. He went apart to contemplate and consider, to pray and to plan. His ministry was about to begin. So as mortals, victims coming out of an experience like that with hearing a voice from the sky as a mortal, and I let people know that I've been hearing voices, I'd probably find myself in an institution somewhere and also probably would have some pharmaceuticals prescribed for me. Not good, not bad. It's just part of our spiritual journey, part of the process. Now, as metaphysicians, as victors, conscious, a spiritual experience is a big deal, isn't it? It's a rite of passage. And at this stage in our spiritual development, it's not necessary for us to share it with other people, especially with other people who may not understand. Some of my family members who don't follow this particular path would not understand, but I had shared it anyway and then wished I hadn't. Can any of you relate to that? It's just too great a temptation. Yes. But as mystics, spiritual experiences are daily, hourly, moment by moment experiences that range from creating and observing the best parking space for us, all the way to hearing voices and knowing that that's my guidance, and packing up and moving to Anchorage, Alaska for no really good reason. Those are the things that happen, and we know that it will all evolve, and we will know the reason that we're following that guidance. This is how I ended up back in Birmingham. I think I've told you there's still marks on I-65 where I was saying, no, no, no. But now I know why I'm back here, and I'm glad I'm back here. I've been back now longer than I was away. So, as mystics, temptation is just, yes, temptation just is. Yes, it comes and it goes, and we observe and we let it go. And it isn't good, it isn't bad, it just is what it is. So what were the temptations that Jesus experienced in the wilderness? The first one was, turn these stones into bread. Well, we know that for Mick Jagger, that worked out pretty well. Turning stones into bread. Yes, sorry, I couldn't help that. Oh. So, turning stones into bread. So for us today, in a practical way, where is it in our lives are we tempted to use tricks, dishonesty, or manipulation to get what we want? It's tax season. Oh, the temptation. As mortals and victims, it's okay to cheat. After all, the world has been cheating me all along, so it's my turn to cheat back. Someone once said that you may not agree with every department in the government, but you really have to hand it to the IRS. I know, yeah. But as metaphysicians, we know that what goes around comes around, and the karma is just too scary. Anyone remember who, well, you probably don't remember, but have you heard someone say who Arthur Godfrey is? Arthur Godfrey, he was an entertainer in the early 20th century, and here's what he said about taxes. He said, I feel honored to pay taxes in America. The thing is, I could probably feel just as honored for about half the price. One other thing to note, other than it being the tax deadline, here's two other things that happened on April 15th. Just saying, oh, by the way, it was the day the Titanic sunk, and it was the day Lincoln was shot. Just saying. Okay, April 15th, coming right up. Everybody be ready. So as mystics, we file our taxes with integrity and gratitude. I am a spiritual being, and I have chosen to have a human experience. And because I chose to have this human experience, and I chose to have it here in the United States of America, then I'm choosing to be honest with my taxes. So what was Jesus' next temptation? Jump off the mountain. So where are we in our lives tempted to do things for attention? Well, like that, for example. As mortals, any attention will do, whether it's something I did great or something I did poorly. Any attention will do. Just notice me. We metaphysicians, we also have our attention-getting strategies too, don't we? We've just become much more subtle about it. The procrastination and perfectionism game comes to mind. You know what I mean by that? We put things off because we know that we're never going to be able to do it perfectly. And who is that tempter behind me saying this? It's the inner adversary. Some people call it the ego. You've heard me say before here that I've made peace with my ego, and part of that, she serves me, and part of that making peace with her was that I gave her a name. Her name is Struggleopagus. She's the woolly mammoth in the room that cannot be ignored, but it's never enough for her. So sit quietly. We will get through this, right? So we pass up that temptation to jump off the mountain. As mystics, we know we can jump off the mountain, and the angels will bear us up into another body, into a new incarnation, and then we have to do infancy and adolescence all over again. No, thank you. I'll pass. So what was the other temptation? Power and prestige. Rule the world. People will bow down and bask in my glory. And as mortals, we're always on the lookout for a get-rich-quick scheme. It's very tempting. Yes. It's a fast ticket to the high road looking for that. But as metaphysicians, we know that we can have it all. That all we need to do is shift our consciousness and we shift our experience. And as mystics, we know we already have it all. As masters, we know there is nothing to have. So just who was this tempter, this devil, this Satan? It's interesting, it starts with S, sibilant, Satan, who confronted Jesus in the wilderness. It's an interesting story. In pure Jewish theology, there's only one God. This God created the earth, made it a garden, populated it with great creatures of all sorts, warmed it with the sun, enchanted it with the moon, and dazzled it with the stars. One God. The satanic influence came on the scene only when God's people began to get our own ideas, didn't we? The allegory of creation, the devil first shows up as what? A snake, right? And the interesting thing is that although the book of Genesis is the first book in the Hebrew Bible, what we Christians call the Old Testament, it's not the order in which the books were written. The first scriptures were recorded about 600 years before the time of Jesus. These were the books of the prophets. And then later, some stories from Genesis were written down, mostly from an oral tradition, that is, mouth to ear, around a campfire. Anybody ever played that game, telegraph, where you say something and you see what happens? Right. So oral tradition, everything got written down. Later, So they decided to record the story of creation. Now, there were several influences by this time. By this time, it's not the pure Jewish tradition any longer. There were other influences. Some of those influences were from the Persians, from Zoroastrianism, where they had a two-god religion. Some of those influences were from the Babylonian times and also from Greek mythology, where what we see as the devil, yes, today bears a striking resemblance to the Greek god Pan. So the idea of Satan became much more entrenched in Hebrew thought in the intertestamental period, that is, the period between what we Christians call the Old Testament and the New Testament. And this could have been because God's chosen people, a friend of mine, a rabbi, once said, in order to entertain a group of ministers sitting around, he said, well, some of us have said to each other, if we're God's chosen people, next time, choose somebody else. So one power after another came along to dominate them, and most scholars agree that it was the idea of having an opposing power was so that there was someone to blame. It's interesting that when people are interviewed, just populations are interviewed, and they ask whether they believe in the devil, many people say yes, a devil and a hell, because there are many people that they are sure need to go there. So, here in this church this morning, and in hundreds of Unity churches around the world, we affirm there is one presence and one power in the universe and in my life, God, the good, omnipotent. We continue to affirm it because we know that we need to remind ourselves to take responsibility for our own experiences. Many of us are at the metaphysician stage in some areas of our lives while we're consciously using affirmations to change our lives. And many of us are experiencing mysticism, at least some of the time, a place where we know that even calling God good infers its opposite. So for the last 15 minutes or so, you've been giving me the devil. So are we ready? Yes. So are we ready to let the devil go? Are you ready to let the devil go? You can keep the devil as long as you want to. It's all right. There's one thing I love about Unity is we ask, we encourage. Think for yourself. If that essence of the opposing power is working for you and it is part of your life and you are not ready to give it up, hang on to it as long as you need to. So what does that mean for us about temptation? It means we have the power. We have the power to resist. We have the power to allow. We have the power to choose how we will live our lives. Because after all, we are God's beloved. Will you affirm with me, I am God's beloved. I am God's beloved, in whom God is well pleased. Let's pray. Precious, precious Spirit, we're so grateful to know this path, to know that wherever we are on this path is not good, it's not bad, it just is, and it is all okay. Because we chose to be here in human bodies for a time. We're grateful for the opportunity to have experiences that remind us of who we are, lights, and why we're here to shine. In gratitude for the path paved by our way shower, Jesus the Christ, we say, Amen.